All right, hi everyone. I'm going to go through this question now. Most of us should have done it. If not, it's okay. We'll do it now. This is a 5-marker from an old prelim exam. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically the gist is the question is saying the darker colored frogs were better adapted to the environment that had more radiation, which was like Chernobyl. And then they're just trying to explain using Darwin and Wallace's theory, like why that's the case, right? So this question gives us some stimulus. We should tailor our answer to the stimulus. It's out of 5 marks, but before we address this question, it asks us to use our knowledge of Darwin and Wallace's theory of evolution by natural selection. And whenever we have a question that asks us to do that, we should kind of talk about the 5 tenets of Darwin's theory. I'm going to get us to list it on the board. Can someone tell me what the 5 tenets are? What are the 5 tenets to his theory? Yeah, okay, so there's variation. All right, that's one. What's another one? Selection, okay, sure. So selection, what do you mean by selection?
There has to be an advantage.
Yeah, so I'm going to say the most adapted will survive or have an advantage. Anything else? Inheritance, so production. I'll say for inheritance, I'll just say, yeah, the trait will get passed on. All right, anything else? What are my other 2 tenets?
It happens over time.
Yep, so I'll tag that here. Over time, population should show more of the advantageous traits. And what's my last one? Yes?
More offspring are produced that can survive.
Yeah, perfect. Right, cool. More offspring are produced than can survive. Right. I'll tag that under reproduction as well, actually. All right, cool. So these are my 5 tenets, my 5 dot points. I have labeled them incorrectly, so I apologize. The reproduction should be reproduction should be these last 2. All right, cool. So I have my 5 tenets here. Right, so we have variation, we have selection, and we have reproduction. Right, so we need to find a way to get 5 marks. I'm just going to hazard a guess. Actually, I don't need a guess, I know. But the marking criteria is just going to say, did you include all these 5 tenets, and did you relate these 5 tenets back to the original response? If yes, then you get the mark. Right, so we need to find out a way to include all this in our response. Now, like I said yesterday, you can write a paragraph. I know that's on our minds because English is today. But you can also just, you can just write dot points, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to address each of these dot points one by one with relation to the syllabus, or the stimulus, I mean. So I'm just going to tag this as 1, tag this as 2, 3, 4, and 5. Right? Yes, Lucas?
Why is the second last one reproduction?
Because these have to do with reproduction. So the fact that more offspring are produced than can survive, and the fact that through reproduction, the advantageous traits will appear more over time, that's because of the reproductive process. So it's kind of like I would pay more attention to the points themselves and less to the way I've sorted it. I've just sorted it so it can like kind of be easier for us to understand, right? Cool. So how do I address this question? Well, I can start off by just stating my first point, right? There is always variation in any population, right? And how am I going to talk about that? Well, I'll just say, look, there are dark-colored frogs and there are light-colored frogs, right? Now, what next I should talk about? Well, I should mention the fact that the stimulus says that the dark-colored frogs are more dominant in Chernobyl, and there's some benefit to that, right? It talks about how melanin protects the effect of UV radiation and protects against cellular damage, which can also help against ionizing radiation, right? So my next point selection, I'm going to talk about the fact that dark frogs have melanin, and that protects against ionizing radiation. So right, I should attribute the fact that this is providing some sort of advantage, right? So this provides an advantage over the light-colored frogs. Yeah. Right. So that's number 2 ticked off, and number 3 as well. So I'll tag that here. Right. Now I should talk about my last 2 tenets in relation to the syllabus or stimulus. Why do I keep saying syllabus? So my last 2 are, well, over time, if the dark-colored frogs have an advantage, they're much more likely to reproduce and have offspring, and then more offspring are produced than can survive, right? So I'm just going to say, I'll do 5 first, right? So more offspring are made than can survive. So therefore, only the ones with advantageous traits will pass on their genetic information to the next generation, right? So therefore, only the advantageous trait, in this case it's the dark frogs, are likely to reproduce, right? And then this leads to the fact that the population will change over time to reflect this state, right? So it will be dark. And that's my 4th tenet. Yes, Arya, what's up?
Does this mean that having more offspring and having harsher selection pressures will increase the speed of evolution?
Having more offspring and having harsh selection. Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, so actually a really good way to model that is, well, you know, a lot of times you can think of evolution as being really slow, right? Happening over millions of years, right? And that the limiting factor, as you said, is how fast we reproduce, right? Because if you reproduce really slowly, then the likelihood of us having beneficial traits being introduced into our gene pool is also really slow, right? But if you think of something like, you know, COVID, right? You know how like a few months after, it's like, oh my gosh, this Delta variant is going to kill us all. And then like, oh, this Omega variant is like also really bad, right? Well, bacteria and viruses reproduce on a much smaller time scale than us, right? You know, I don't know what the average age is for a female to give birth, like, I don't know, 25, 28, I don't know. Right? I don't know how old your parents were when they gave birth to you, but you know, it takes like 30 years to make one baby, right, for humans, right? But you know, in bacteria, how long do they take to reproduce? Like 20 minutes, right? So you know, from the time this period started to this period ending, one bacteria could have become like a few thousand already, right? So yes, evolution can be slow. That's just because we reproduce slowly. But evolution can be really quick in stuff like bacteria that reproduce really quickly. Yeah, so that's a good question though. Yeah?
There's variations, like,
the selection pressures.
They're linked. What about the selection pressures? Is that
Yeah, it's the same. Yes, if the selection pressures are harsher, then you're gonna select more aggressively for the desired trait. Yeah. So like now we don't really have many selection pressures, so a lot of traits that aren't advantageous for us don't really matter. Yeah, because it's not impacting our quality of life or our ability to reproduce. Yeah. All right. Thanks everyone.